Nero was 140 pounds of scarred muscle, bone-crushing jaws, and pure grieving rage. 3 trained handlers had already ended up in the emergency room, one of them with tendons hanging out of his forearm like torn ribbon. The vet had thrown up her hands. The kennel master had refused to enter the run without a shock pole. And that morning, Dante Marchetti, the most feared Mafia boss on the Eastern Seaboard, had given the final order in a voice as flat and cold as gravestone marble. Put the dog down at dawn. End his suffering. End the reminder of the brother they had buried 8 months ago. But then, at 2 in the morning on a freezing October night, the new maid walked into the kennel with a chipped ceramic bowl of leftover beef stew. She was soft-spoken. She was plus-sized. She was so terrified her hands were shaking hard enough to rattle the spoon against the porcelain. And the beast that had torn through grown men in tactical gear stopped growling, lowered its massive scarred head, and ate every bite from her fingers. Then it laid down and rested its heavy skull across her thigh, like a knight surrendering his sword. Upstairs in his private study, Dante Marchetti set down his crystal tumbler of scotch, leaned forward toward the security monitor, and did not blink for a full minute. Because of his brother's Rottweiler, the last living creature Marco had loved, had chosen to trust this quiet, curvy stranger. Then Dante needed to know exactly who she was, where she came from, what her secrets were, and why, for the first time in 8 months, his own frozen heart had just started beating like it remembered how. Before we go one step further into this story, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload, and drop the city you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to see where our story family is tuning in from tonight. Isabella Moreno was 27 years old, and she had been raised by a mother who taught her that the softest women carried the heaviest worlds. Bella had warm brown eyes that turned amber in the sunlight, a soft round face with a dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and dark curls that she wound into a low, tidy bun at the nape of her neck. She was beautifully, unapologetically plus-sized, with generous hips and a full soft waist, and a chest that filled out even the most modest of blouses. But years of cruel voices had trained her to wrap herself in oversized cardigans and drab uniforms, to make herself smaller in doorways, to apologize with her posture before she ever opened her mouth. Not because she was ashamed of her body, but because the world had never once let her forget it existed. She had been 3 semesters away from finishing her nursing degree when her mother collapsed in the kitchen of their small walk-up in Queens. Kidney failure, advanced, dialysis 3 times a week, and a transplant list longer than a lifetime. Bella lost her scholarship the moment she missed her clinical rotations to sit at her mother's bedside. She sold her father's old watch. She sold her textbooks. She picked up night shifts at a diner and daytime cleaning jobs, and it was still not enough. The medical bills came in stacks now, red-stamped and merciless. And when the domestic staffing agency on Lexington Avenue called her back after her 3rd interview, the woman on the other end of the phone had lowered her voice into an almost apologetic whisper. "The pay is triple the standard rate," she had said. "Live in, room and board included. But you will never speak the family's name outside those walls. Do you understand what you are agreeing to, Miss Moreno?" Bella had gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She had thought of her mother's gray face on the hospital pillow. She had said yes before the woman finished the sentence. The Marchetti estate sat on 11 acres of Long Island coastline behind a 15-foot wrought iron gate topped with spikes shaped like laurel leaves. When the black town car finally rolled through those gates on a gray Tuesday morning, Bella pressed her forehead lightly to the tinted window and tried to breathe. The mansion rose out of the mist like something from an old European novel, 3 stories of pale limestone and dark ivy, with tall arched windows and a slate roof gone silver with age. Manicured hedges lined the drive in perfect green corridors. Rose gardens gone dormant for the season curled around the eastern wing in sleeping thorny knots. And along the tree line, half hidden by cypress and shadow, Bella counted 4 men in matching black suits pretending very badly to be gardeners. None of them were holding pruning shears. All of them were watching the car, The town car rolled to a slow stop under a stone portico held up by two carved columns. Bella clutched her small canvas duffel bag against her stomach like a shield, whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her, and stepped out into the cold Long Island wind. The heavy oak doors of the mansion were already opening. Whatever life she had lived before this moment was ending. Whatever came next, she could feel it in her bones, was going to change her forever. The woman waiting at the top of the stone steps looked as though she had been carved out of the same limestone as the mansion itself. She was in her early 60s, tall and rail-thin, with silver hair pulled into a severe chignon and a floor-length black dress that made no concession to fashion or warmth. Her eyes were the pale gray of a winter sea, and they took Bella apart in one slow, unhurried sweep. From the scuffed toes of her practical black flats, to the worn strap of her canvas duffel, to the modest cardigan buttoned all the way to her collarbone. She did not smile. She did not offer her hand. She simply turned on her heel and began speaking in a clipped Italian-accented English that expected to be followed. "I am Mrs. Greco, the head of house. You will address me as Mrs. Greco, nothing else. You will rise at 5 in the morning. You will report to the kitchen at 5:30. Breakfast service ends at 7. The main floors are to be dusted, polished, and inspected by 10. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not look Mr. Marchetti in the eye. You will not look any of his associates in the eye either, particularly the ones you do not recognize. If a guest asks you a question, your answer will be yes, sir, no, sir, or I will fetch someone who can help you, sir. Nothing more. Do you understand me, Miss Moreno?" Bella nodded quickly, hurrying to keep up as they moved through a grand foyer that made her forget how to breathe. The ceiling arched 2 stories above them, held up by dark walnut beams, and lit by a chandelier the size of a small car, dripping with crystal that scattered the gray morning light across the marble floor in soft rainbows. Oil paintings of stern-faced men in old-fashioned suits stared down from the walls. The air smelled of beeswax, aged leather, fresh coffee from a distant kitchen, and something else underneath it, all that Bella could not quite name. Something faintly metallic. Something that made the back of her tongue taste like a copper penny. "There are 3 absolute rules," Mrs. Greco continued, pausing at the foot of a sweeping staircase and turning to face her with those pale winter eyes. "You will follow them if you value your position and your life. Rule 1. You will never, under any circumstance, enter the west wing of this house. Those are Mr. Marchetti's private quarters, and the door at the end of the corridor is not to be opened by anyone but him. Rule 2. You will not touch the telephones in the main rooms. If you need to call your family, you will use the staff phone in the pantry, and you will speak only in English. Rule 3. And this rule, Miss Moreno, is the one that has ended employment for 4 girls before you. You will not, for any reason, at any hour of the day or night, approach the kennel behind the rose garden. You will not feed the animal inside it. You will not speak to it. You will not so much as look at the door. Do you understand?" Bella whispered yes, Mrs. Greco. The old woman studied her for another long moment, and something almost like pity flickered across the sharp lines of her face before it disappeared again. Then she turned and led Bella up 3 flights of narrow servant stairs to a small attic bedroom tucked under the eaves. The room was plain but clean, with a single iron bed, a wooden wardrobe, a small writing desk beneath a dormer window, and a threadbare rug in faded blue. "Uniforms are in the wardrobe," Mrs. Greco said from the doorway. "Black dress, white apron, sensible shoes. Be in the kitchen in 20 minutes. And Miss Moreno, do not make me regret hiring you." Then she was gone, and Bella was alone in a room that smelled of cedar and old rain. The first 3 days passed in a blur of aching feet and biting her tongue. Bella polished silver until her fingertips turned black. She scrubbed marble floors on her hands and knees until her lower back screamed. She learned that the staff numbered 11 in total, that no one made eye contact with each other in the hallways, and that the moment Dante Marchetti's black armored sedan rolled up the drive each evening, the entire house held its breath as one. She had not yet seen him. She had only felt him. The way the temperature of a room seemed to drop when he was on the same floor. The way the older staff would go silent mid-sentence, glance toward the ceiling, and then quietly change the subject. But it was on the third night, sometime past 1 in the morning, that Bella first heard the sound that would change her life. She had been lying awake in her narrow iron bed, staring at the moonlight on the sloped ceiling, when it drifted up through the closed dormer window. A howl. Low, ragged, unbearably lonely. It was not the howl of a dog warning off strangers. It was the howl of something mourning, something breaking, something that had run out of ways to carry its own grief. Bella sat up slowly in bed, her breath fogging in the cold attic air, and pressed her palm flat against the icy window pane. Down beyond the sleeping rose garden, she could just make out the low stone shape of the forbidden kennel, and she understood, with a sudden aching certainty that filled her chest like cold water, that whatever creature was locked inside that place was dying of the same thing that had almost killed her when her father passed. It was dying of a broken heart. The next day, Bella could not stop thinking about the howl. She scrubbed the entry hall floor and heard it echoing under the sound of her own breathing. She polished the dining room silver and saw grief in the reflection of every spoon. During the afternoon lull, when Mrs. Greco disappeared into the linen closet with her ledgers, Bella slipped quietly into the kitchen and cornered Rosa, the round-cheeked cook who had been the only person in the house to offer her a warm smile. "Rosa," she whispered, pretending to help chop onions. "What is in the kennel behind the rose garden? What are they keeping down there?" Rosa went pale under her flower dusting. She glanced at the doorway, crossed herself quickly, and lowered her voice into the pot of simmering broth, as though the steam itself might carry her words upstairs. "His name is Nero," Rosa whispered. "A Rottweiler, 140 pounds of muscle, and once the sweetest boy you ever saw. But he did not belong to Mr. Marchetti. He belonged to Marco, Mr. Marchetti's younger brother. The bright one, the gentle one, the only person in this whole cursed house who ever laughed out loud. Marco was ambushed at a restaurant in Brooklyn 8 months ago, shot 14 times in front of his wife. Nero was in the car outside, and when they finally opened the door, that dog had chewed through the leather headrest trying to get to his boy. He has not eaten a proper meal since. Not one. He attacked the vet. He attacked 2 handlers. He put the kennel master in the hospital last week. And Mr. Marchetti, God forgive him, has ordered the dog put down at sunrise tomorrow. He says it is a mercy. But I have known Dante Marchetti since he was a boy in short pants, and I will tell you what I think. I think he cannot bear to look at that animal one more day, because Nero is the last living thing on this earth that loved his brother." Bella did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed and thought of her own father, dead 6 years now, and the small terrier who had followed her father everywhere, and who had died of what the vet called simple old age 3 months to the day after the funeral. She thought of her mother in the hospital bed, and how grief could hollow a body out from the inside until there was nothing left but the shape of what used to live there. At 1:30 in the morning, Bella got out of bed. She pulled a heavy wool shawl over her nightgown. She crept down 3 flights of servant stairs on bare feet, slipped into the sleeping kitchen, and quietly warmed the leftover beef stew from that evening's dinner. She spooned it into a chipped ceramic bowl. She carried it out through the servant's door into the freezing October night. The rose garden was silver with frost under the moon. Her breath came out in soft white clouds. Bella walked slowly down the flagstone path, her hands shaking so badly she was certain she would spill the stew before she ever reached him. The kennel was a low stone structure at the far end of the garden, with a heavy iron gate and a run enclosed in thick chain link. As she approached, a shape rose out of the darkness inside the run, massive, silent, 2 eyes catching the moonlight like polished amber. Then the growl started, low, deep, a sound that vibrated up through the frozen ground into the soles of her bare feet. Every sensible part of Bella's brain screamed at her to turn around, to run, to save herself. But she thought of Nero pressed against a leather headrest, chewing through it to get to a boy who was already gone. She sank slowly to her knees on the freezing flagstones just outside the chain link. She set the ceramic bowl down between them. She did not reach for the latch. She did not raise her eyes to challenge him. She simply began to hum, very softly, the lullaby her mother had sung to her every night of her childhood, an old Spanish song about a moon that watched over sleeping children. And then, in a whisper he could barely have heard, she spoke to him. Yo también he perdido alguien, mi amor, she murmured. I have lost someone too, my love. It hurts. It hurts so much. But you have to eat, guapo. You have to eat, because the ones who loved us would not want us to disappear. Come. Come and eat. I will sit here with you until you do. The growl stopped. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the massive shape moved forward into the moonlight, and Bella saw him clearly for the first time. Nero was enormous, scarred across his broad chest, and along one flank where the fur had grown back gray and rough. His ribs showed too sharply beneath his coat. His muzzle was graying at the edges, though he could not have been more than 5 years old. He walked to the chain link. He lowered his enormous head. He sniffed the bowl. And then, with a small broken sound in his throat that was almost a whimper, he began to eat. Bella slowly, carefully, unlatched the gate. She sat down cross-legged on the cold stone floor of the run, and when the bowl was empty, Nero laid his heavy scarred skull across her thigh and closed his amber eyes. She stroked his ears. She wept silently into his fur. And she did not know that in a third-floor window of the West Wing, a man with cold gray eyes and a glass of untouched scotch had been watching her the entire time. Bella crept back to her attic bedroom just before 4 in the morning, her nightgown streaked with kennel dust and her cheeks stiff with dry tears. She fell into a dreamless sleep and woke to Mrs. Greco's sharp knock at 5 on the dot. She dressed with trembling hands, certain that the moment she stepped into the kitchen, she would be dragged out by the collar and thrown onto the drive with her canvas duffel bag hurled after her. But breakfast service passed without incident. Rosa slid her an extra biscuit and a worried look. Mrs. Greco said nothing at all, and Bella began slowly to breathe again. It was mid-morning, and she was polishing the enormous mahogany dining table with a soft cloth and a pot of beeswax, when a shadow fell across the wood in front of her. Bella froze. Every muscle in her body went still. She knew, without lifting her head, exactly who was standing 3 feet behind her. Dante Marchetti was 38 years old, and he wore his power the way other men wore expensive cologne, effortlessly and without apology. He was tall enough that Bella had to tilt her chin up to find his face, with broad shoulders that filled out a charcoal 3-piece suit as though the fabric had been grown on his skin. His jet black hair was cut short and threaded with early silver at the temples. His jaw looked as though it had been chiseled from cold granite by a sculptor who had run out of patience for softness. And his eyes, when Bella finally foolishly forgot Mrs. Greco's rule and looked up, were the pale gray of winter's storm clouds, calm on the surface, and holding something violent underneath. He smelled of cedarwood and black tobacco and expensive soap, with something darker underneath, something that reminded her of the gun oil her father used to clean his old service pistol. "You went to the kennel last night, Miss Moreno," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone with the faintest curl of Sicilian at the edges of certain words. It was not a question. Bella opened her mouth to apologize, to beg, to say anything at all, but nothing came out. She could only nod. Dante took one slow step closer. He studied her the way a man studies a piece of art he has just decided he cannot live without owning. His pale gray gaze moved over the soft round line of her cheek, the freckles across her nose, the trembling curve of her lower lip, the generous slope of her shoulders inside the plain black uniform, the way her curves filled out the modest fabric in a manner that made something ancient and possessive tighten deep in his chest. "Nero has not eaten a full meal in 8 months, Dante said quietly. He has bitten 3 men. He was scheduled to be put down at sunrise this morning. I canceled the order at 3 in the morning. You will feed him every day from now on. You will be paid double your current wage. You will not refuse me, Miss Moreno. Do you understand?" Bella whispered yes, sir. Dante's mouth did something that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Then he turned and walked out of the dining room without another word, and Bella had to grip the edge of the mahogany table to keep her knees from buckling. That night, when she climbed the 3 flights of servant stairs to her attic bedroom, she found a large, flat, matte black box resting on her narrow bed. It was tied with heavy cream-colored ribbon. Bella untied it with shaking fingers, folded back the layers of tissue paper, and gasped. Inside was a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, so soft it felt like water pouring through her hands. It was cut generously, designed to celebrate her curves rather than to hide them, with a wide neckline that would sit gracefully across her collarbones, and long sleeves meant to warm her cold attic mornings. There was no note. There did not need to be. Over the following weeks, a strange new rhythm settled into the great limestone house. Every morning at dawn, Bella carried a warm bowl to the kennel, and Nero came galloping to the gate to meet her, his stub of a tail wagging so hard his whole hindquarters wobbled. Every afternoon, the massive scarred Rottweiler padded silently behind her from room to room as she worked, 140 pounds of devoted shadow, growling low in his throat at any staff member who stepped too close to her. And every evening, without fail, Dante Marchetti found some quiet, plausible reason to be in the same room she was cleaning, reviewing shipping ledgers in the sunroom while she dusted the bookshelves, drinking espresso at the kitchen island while she kneaded bread with Rosa, standing at the tall arched window of his study, watching the rose garden, when Bella walked past on her way to the kennel. He never once touched her, but he watched her the way a starving man watches the first warm bread of winter. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in mid-November, Bella was replacing linens in an unused guest suite in the East Wing when she heard two men speaking in rapid, hushed Sicilian on the other side of the wall. Bella's grandmother had been born in a small village outside Palermo, and Bella had grown up rolling her R's on the old woman's knee. She understood every word. "The boss trusts no one now," the first voice was saying, "but the dog trusts the fat girl. Use her. Slip something into the bowl she carries to the animal each morning. When the beast dies in her hands, Dante will finally break. Then we finish him at the Christmas gala." The second voice grunted its agreement, and Bella, standing frozen with a folded pillowcase pressed against her chest, felt every drop of blood in her body turn to ice. Because she recognized the first voice. It belonged to Enzo Ricci, Dante's right-hand man, his god brother. The only man on this earth Dante Marchetti trusted with his life. If Bella's courage is giving you chills right now, take 1 second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload, and drop the city you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to see where our story family is tuning in from tonight. Bella did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow iron bed with her hands pressed flat against her stomach and stared at the moonlight sliding across the sloped attic ceiling, running the terrible arithmetic over and over. If she said nothing, Nero would be dead within days, and Dante would be dead by Christmas. If she went to Dante with no proof and accused the man he called his brother, she would be dismissed at best and dropped into the Long Island Sound at worst. But there was a third path, and it was the one her mother had taught her to walk, the one that scared her most. She could tell the truth. She could stand up straight, look a killer in the eye, and speak. Bella closed her eyes and thought of her father, who had died believing his daughter was brave. By dawn, she had made her decision. The next morning, Bella asked Mrs. Greco for a private audience with Mr. Marchetti. The old head of house looked at her as though she had asked to fly to the moon on a broomstick. Maids did not request audiences. Maids did not speak to Mr. Marchetti at all unless directly addressed. But something in Bella's steady brown eyes made Mrs. Greco stop, really look at her for the first time since she had arrived, and slowly, wordlessly, reach for the internal phone on the wall. 20 minutes later, Bella was escorted through the forbidden door at the end of the West Wing corridor and into a study lined with dark walnut shelves and leather-bound books that smelled of cedar and old paper. Dante sat behind an enormous mahogany desk in his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, a glass of untouched scotch beside a stack of ledgers. He gestured to the chair across from him. Bella did not sit. She stood tall. She squared her generous shoulders the way her dying mother had taught her to square them. And then she told him everything in perfect, unbroken Sicilian. Dante did not move. He did not blink. His pale gray eyes stayed locked on her face as she spoke, and the only sign that he had heard a single word of what she was saying was the slow, terrible tightening of his knuckles around the arm of his leather chair until they turned bone white. When she finished, silence filled the study like water filling a sinking ship. Then Dante rose slowly to his feet. He walked around the mahogany desk. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest through her plain black uniform, close enough that she could smell the cedarwood and black tobacco and gun oil that lived on his skin. "Isabella," he murmured, and the way he shaped her full name in his mouth made her knees go soft. "Do you understand what you have just done? If you are wrong, I lose the last brother I have left in this world. If you are right, I have been sleeping beside a viper for 20 years. Either way, from this moment forward, you belong to me. Not as a maid, as mine. Do you understand?" Bella swallowed hard. She nodded. Dante lifted one large, calloused hand, and, for the first time, he touched her. He tucked a loose, dark curl behind her ear with a tenderness that did not match anything else about him. And then he stepped back and picked up his phone and made 3 quiet calls in Sicilian that Bella pretended not to understand. 2 weeks later, on the night of the Marchetti Christmas Gala, the great limestone mansion glittered like a kingdom. Thousands of white lights wound through the bare branches of the winter trees. A string quartet played in the ballroom. Senators, shipping magnates, and men in tailored suits, whose resumes were written in blood, filled every corner of the ground floor. And at exactly 9 o'clock, the string quartet fell silent. Every head in the room turned toward the grand staircase, and Isabella Moreno began to descend. She wore a floor-length gown of deep emerald velvet, custom cut to worship every generous curve of her body, from the soft swell of her chest to the lush slope of her hips. Her dark curls were swept up into a crown of loose waves. At her throat lay the Marchetti diamonds, cold and ancient and glittering like captured stars, given to her that evening by Dante himself with a whispered promise against her temple. Whispers rippled through the ballroom. Who is she? Where did she come from? Dante Marchetti met her at the bottom of the staircase, took her soft hand in his, pressed a slow kiss to her knuckles, and turned to face the room. He did not need to say a single word. Every man in that ballroom understood in one heartbeat that this woman was untouchable. Then Enzo Ricci approached, all easy charm and warm smile, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "A toast, brother," Enzo said in Sicilian, "to the boss and his beautiful new lady." Dante took the offered glass. He looked his god brother directly in the eye, and in the same soft, calm Sicilian, he answered, "Drink it yourself, Enzo." The music stopped. 2 enormous men in black suits closed in from behind. Nero, standing at Bella's side in a black leather collar, let out a low, rumbling growl that made the crystal chandeliers tremble. Enzo was escorted out through the side doors. Somewhere in the black waters of the Long Island Sound at 3 in the morning, a weighted body slipped quietly beneath the surface and did not come back up. The morning after the gala, Bella woke in a bedroom she did not recognize. Silk sheets, a view of the gray Atlantic through tall, arched windows, and Dante Marchetti sitting fully dressed in a leather armchair across from the bed, watching her sleep the way Nero used to watch the kennel door. "Your mother was transferred last night," he said quietly, "to the finest kidney specialist in Manhattan. Her dialysis is covered. Her name has been moved to the top of the transplant list. You will never worry about money again as long as you live." Bella's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" she whispered. Dante rose, crossed the room, and sat on the edge of the bed. He cupped her soft cheek in his large hand, and his pale gray eyes were no longer cold. "Because for 8 months my brother's dog would not eat," he said softly. "For 8 months I have not slept." And then a soft-spoken girl with kind eyes and a mother she was trying to save walked into my house, and both of us started breathing again. "Nero chose you first, Isabella, but I am choosing you now. I do not want a wife who blends in. I want a queen who takes up space, every beautiful, generous inch of it. Stay. Rule this house with me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you were never too much. You were always exactly enough." Bella thought of every man who had ever called her too big, too soft, too much. She thought of her mother, safe at last. She thought of a scarred Rottweiler who had chosen her when he had chosen no one else in a world of grief. and she closed the last small distance between them and kissed Dante Marchetti, softly, then deeply, then completely. The chubby maid hired to scrub floors had become the queen of the Marchetti empire. And every man who had ever called her invisible would learn, the hard way, that the woman a killer dog trusts is the woman a killer king will burn the world for. If you loved Bella's story and you want more romances where the underestimated woman becomes the untouchable queen, do me one last favor tonight. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss an upload, and tell me one more time in the comments, what city are you watching from? Drop it below, and I will see you in the very next story.